One of the things that I think is really important to remember is we are talking about decolonizing our minds. And how do we decolonize a government that is very resistant to that? That figures, we've issued an apology, we wash our hands clean of any kind of guilt that our people had in committing genocide against Indigenous peoples. It's a government that created a huge omnibus bill with 90-odd recommendations. In particular, 9 of those amendments, 9 of those portions of that bill affected directly Indigenous peoples' rights, impacted Indigenous peoples' rights without any consultations. So again, they broke their own laws because they were required under sections 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982. And they continue to allow third-party developments to go on while so-called land negotiations go on, or land claims. And as many of you here might know, our elders say we're not claiming any land that's not ours. We're trying to protect the land. And so decolonization happens, it's not just for Indigenous people to emerge, and I think Natalia has demonstrated some of those things that they're doing in having their own consultations with their own people and bringing and emerging this kind of voice that says this is our version of development. And that development means more respect for the land. And you know, our previous speakers as well have talked about maybe one day we'll have development that doesn't include mining. You know, resource extraction is not sustainable. And I think it's been said many times by our elders, we're not against development. We are against the contamination and the destruction of the earth. So there has to be a better way. If you can send a little machine the size of a washing machine to land on a comet, then surely there must be a way to bring about system change. Surely we have the intelligence to be able to be more compassionate in regards to ourselves, the children, future generations, and the natural world that we rely upon. Kairos has asked, what can we do to work together? Allies, Indigenous peoples, what do Indigenous peoples need? Kairos is interested in increasing their capacity on these very important issues. What are the policy gaps and knowledge gaps? Well, the knowledge gaps we know, a lot of them are based on ignorance and racism. And so there's that issue, that level that we need to tackle. But a community, in order to be able to defend itself, must understand and have knowledge of what their rights are. Free, prior, and informed consent is an important principle in the defense of Indigenous peoples' rights. Extractive industries are allowed to continue to destroy the planet with the government's approval. We know that they are no longer required to have obligatory environmental impact studies. And so why would they go to Guatemala and do proper impact studies? Why should they? They've been allowed to do this, to do whatever they want for so long. And how can we preserve those parts of our indigenous identity that have continue to be threatened by colonization, continue to be threatened by policies and programs that are created by a government that does not like us, does not respect us, has a termination plan for us? It begins with knowledge. Everybody knows that cliche, knowledge is power. Well, knowledge that we've heard at this table has been very, very important. Are there ways to make links between work to address missing and murdered Indigenous women and mining justice? I've listened and I read an article by Melina Massimo, whose sister was killed last year. And she talks about whether it's a national plan of action or an inquiry, it must be led by the families who have lost loved ones. And we have lost loved ones from the Indian residential school, through wars that were not our own, and it continues and it continues and it continues. What kind of research needs to be done? And I really like what Ilana was talking about when she was talks about research training for your communities. And I think that's really important to have in all our communities, is research training. Because we do have divisions. We're not gonna lie, we're not gonna pretend that they do not exist. But if you go to Parliament just up the hill, they are not speaking with one voice either. And in fact, they're making unilateral decisions on whose human rights will be respected. They're making these interpretations of the rule of law, which are skewed. And if we continue to allow this to go on, you know, we're talking about climate justice. We talk about the climate and how it's affecting the North, the South, you know, and you know, it's not about saving the planet, because she'll be here long after human beings are extinct. So it's really about education, knowledge. How do we make that mental change in society, not just in Canada, but global society, that allows Indigenous peoples to live in freedom and security? And I'm not sure any research could do that, but it's worth a try. It's worth a try, and it needs to be done in collaboration and not led by a certain individual, but in collaboration. We have many examples here. We don't need to rewrite we don't need to create the wheel again. You know, it's been done. Let's look at what's been done. Let's look at the bigger picture, which is the 1% of the 8% are deciding for everybody. It's a rape culture, and you know, the ex-president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, talks about only 4% of rapes on campuses in universities in the United States are reported. That's within general society. So we have a rape culture that is condoned, not just by politicians and the authorities, but in the popular culture that the children and youth are seeing. So on so many levels, we have a lot of work to do. And I think the one priority that we see is family. So how do we get the families together? How do we help the families? And how do we help each other in doing so? And in networking is extremely important. We have social media tools. But we need to be able to understand each other, because we know that social media is not the end-all and be-all in our networking. But it's a good tool. It's one of many tools we should be using. And what types of advocacy on this issue would be most effective? Who is best placed to fill these? How can we collaborate and ensure that Indigenous women's perspectives on good process when considering the risks and potential benefits of a project and its impacts of the project on their communities? Are they widely recognized and reflected in policy and law? So these are the kinds of questions that we would like to have you as the participants perhaps offer some solutions. And we have now 40 minutes, not 40, 50 minutes to discuss this. We will be finishing at 2:30. So offer solutions, and if you have any other links that you want or suggestions, I think this is what this whole meeting is about. So I open the floor to anybody who wants to start the discussion.